Hey guys, and welcome to another video. So as you know, there's a lot of news to do with guilds and the changes to guilds in Heart of Thorns going on this week. Ruby's doing like a whole week worth of live streams. We're going to do them all at the end, and it's been quite a while since we actually did a Q&A, so I thought I'd run through one of those today. Before we get to the questions themselves though, I also wanted to take this opportunity to address a couple of things that had been mentioned on the channel in the comment sections on a few of the videos over this week. 3 things specifically that I've kind of wanted to get off my chest. So first of all, on the topic of legendary armor. Now, in one of the videos this week, I mentioned that the devs have confirmed legendary armor. You can get a full set of legendary armor for the same effort it takes to get a single legendary weapon. And I kind of expressed that I didn't like this very much because it seemed to me that a full set of legendary armor should be harder than a legendary weapon. If you think about it, a legendary weapon can be as little as 1/4 of your build, right? You can have 4 weapons equipped and your legendary could just be an offhand. While your armor is always a consistent and large part of your character, especially when you consider the fact that legendary armor allows you to stat swap and you're only ever going to need 3 sets, and then basically mechanically you're done for the game. You know, ArenaNet's idea of adding living world updates like that we saw with Drytop and the Silver Waste, where they add a new stat set and you do specific stuff in that map to get that specific stat set. If you just do a lot of raids and you get 3 sets of legendary armor, 1 for heavy, 1 for medium, 1 for light, you're never going to care about that element of any of the updates that ever go into Guild Wars 2 again, right? So I kind of expressed that I wanted it to be a little bit more difficult. I was very flippant with my comment though, and I'll retract it. I kind of said, oh, you know, 1 piece of legendary armor should be equivalent to a single legendary weapon. That's probably quite extreme. I think it's more likely that a full set of legendary armor, to me, should be equivalent of the effort of maybe 2 or 3 legendary weapons, not the full 6. And another big thing to consider with the discussion, as many of you rightfully pointed out, is the legendary armor itself, while in terms of like grind or effort, it may be equivalent to a single weapon. If the raids are hard enough, frankly, it could still be much more difficult to get armor than weapons anyway, because there's actual skill cap associated with the armor, while all there is really time gates when it comes to the weapons. So that's definitely a part of the discussion. But one thing I found really quite interesting is, of course, we did a video on Guild Wars 2 efficiency quite recently, where you can compare your stats to everyone else in the community. Now, in the video I said, you know, maybe I only want this to be harder than legendary weapons, because I'm kind of in a skewed demographic. I'm one of those people that plays the game a lot, and so I prefer the harder things, while your average person probably wants it a little bit easier. There was a lot of talk about this, and people saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about anymore, you're in the 1%, you're in the 0.1%, blah, blah, blah. Well, actually, through Guild Wars 2 efficiency, very curiously, we can find out exactly what percentile I'm in. I looked through all of my stats. Turns out the only thing I'm really notable at all in like a top percentage of the entire game is deaths. That's right, the only place where I'll actually appear like on a leaderboard, I think I have like 89 most deaths out of everyone who plays Guild Wars 2 and put their stats on Guild Wars 2 efficiency, clocking in at around 25,000 deaths. But for total account wealth, I'm well up into the 90s, so, you know, it's pretty interesting, though, that we're now in a place where we can compare ourselves so directly. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the Druid. Now, the Druid was a huge video we did this week, and I think I probably expressed myself a little bit poorly in it. Some people came away from it thinking that I arbitrarily and mysteriously, for some reason, hate the Ranger class. I'm really not sure where that comes from. I'm not quite sure what people's opinion of my maturity levels are, but they're not so low to just suddenly and randomly hate the Ranger class. I really like Rangers, and specifically, I really do like the idea of a Druid. The idea of a dedicated healer is something that I've really wanted for a long time. I've probably played a lot more pure healing and tested healing out on various classes, more of that than most people in Guild Wars 2 have done. So this is something I really like. I like the idea of the Druid, but I'm just not going to take it on faith that, you know, any of these many reasons why it doesn't currently work are magically going to go away in Heart of Thorns. And that's really what I wanted to express. It's not that I dislike the Druid, it's that I dislike that ArenaNet aren't talking to us about how they're going to resolve the problems they face, because honestly, this isn't going to see use for as long as people can do stuff as simple as rally or drop a water field and everyone blasts on it with no healing investment or whatsoever, and you know, much more. So that is something I want to do. I will accept, though, I did kind of make a mistake when it comes to the Druid. I said one of the things I think it might be lacking is I feared it fell into the Dragon Hunter kind of issue, where many of its traits and things didn't particularly synergize with the rest of the class, and specifically I kind of focused on the pet with that. Well, actually, it seems like there is definitely more synergy there than I gave Ranger credit for. That's just a lack of my knowledge about the class. For example, Moment of Clarity. I actually used to run this on my Asuran Ranger. The reason I have an Asuran Ranger is so that I could run Technobabble, which is an Asuran skill that applies days. And then you can combo it with a Ranger trait that lengthens days duration. And this was a really fun build for me, and actually the druid has a lot of days, so there's some cross synergy there, and there are definitely some things I missed. Alright, last of all, we did do a quiz this week as well. It's something I've wanted to do for a while. I hope you did enjoy it. There were some problems. I just want to establish I do know what they are. The whole ABCD thing is actually very frustrating for me because as I was recording, I just gave the ABCD example off the top of my head. I never really expected that the way I spoke, and this is going to make me sound really stupid, I never really expected the way that I delivered that speech at the start as instructions to tell people to do A, B, C, and D, and then never did in the end. It didn't occur to me, not in the initial recording, not in the editing, not at all. And then, of course, when the video came up, everyone was, you know, saying, oh, this is a huge mistake. So that kind of sucks. But if we do another quiz, definitely that will be resolved. And as for the white text on white backgrounds, the story here is actually that video went up very late that day. And the entire time I was editing, I was planning on dropping a shadow behind the text. So instead of giving the text itself an outline, it was going to look even prettier than that. It was going to have a shadow behind it, and it would have really popped. Problem is, when I dropped the shadow, the way that Sony Vegas works, anyone out there who uses it, completely blows out rendering times, and I basically had to turn it off and hope people would understand, because, hey, I was reading the text out loud anyway, right? So that's kind of the story, and it wouldn't actually be that way going forward. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's a little bit of stuff that was going on the week. Let's jump straight to the questions. For the questions today, I drew some of the more recent ones people have asked. They tend to get the short end of the stick, because I usually pick people who answer their questions really quickly. Well, for this one, it will be some people who ask questions very, very recently. So, first one's from Rain Like Rain, who says, will you be rolling a Sylvari when you play through Heart of Thorns due to the situation they're in and the views approach the characters would take towards you, also hearing the dragon? Also, are you planning on maining a different class? It was going around for a while. It's kind of scary. This was one of those weird situations where I offhandedly say something in a video. When the Chronomancer was revealed, I offhandedly said, yeah, you know, I could see myself going back to Mesmer like I was in Guild Wars 1. And it was really scary on a lot of discussion boards and various places that have nothing to do with my channel. I would see people saying, oh, Wooden Potatoes is thinking of becoming a Chronomancer. Wooden Potatoes is going to become a Chronomancer. And like a lot of people were repeating it. It was really weird to see. In my opinion, as more elite specializations have come out and that kind of excitement's bubbled down a bit, even with my sort of meh attitude when it comes to the Tempest, I think I will probably continue playing my Elementalist. I enjoy the Elementalist playstyle far too much, but that's not to say I won't do a lot of Chronomancer too, and in the end, maybe, yeah, it'll overtake, but I have no formal plans. As for the race, absolutely, you're damn right I'm going to play Sylvari. Come on, I can't pride myself on being someone that cares about the story and the lore and not play a Sylvari in this expansion, but I will first play with my Asura. I want to get the Asuran perspective. I want to play it on my main. I want to enjoy it that first time with my familiar character. And then I'll go through a second time on the Sylvari and I'll get that wider perspective. Hopefully that's a good way to do it. But definitely Sylvari is going to be played. Now that we know they hear the dragon and stuff, absolutely. And it's actually kind of interesting to get a question like this and so clearly know my answer is yes, I'll be playing a Sylvari. Because for the longest time, we just had vague comments from the devs saying, oh, you want to play a Sylvari? And it was like, well, why? What's this really going to offer us? And now, just through some little teasers, some little tidbits from what we've seen in the beta, you can see what they're going for, and I'm suddenly very confident that I do want to do it, which is great. I was a little pessimistic in the early days that it was really going to feel that different, but it does seem to. Next, we got TSGT Gaming, who says, question, I recently started going for a full Ascended armor set for my main profession, which is Thief, just in case the raid system had something like Agony tied to it. Firstly, do you think it will? And secondly, do you think it's worth it with the new legendary armors coming out? I guess it depends on the look. So it was confirmed, actually, that Agony is not a part of raids at all. Agony is a Fractals thing. Agony is the Fractals progression way of making you feel like you're getting better and better gear, right? And that's going to be stuck there with Fractals alone. Raids won't have it. However, on the topic of should you have Ascended in general, we can sum up as, you know, about 5% increase in stats. Crystal Reed actually tweeted out, and this is pretty interesting. She tweeted out saying what kind of armor she thinks people should have for exotic. And she was kind of saying for like the first few encounters, for some of the easier stuff in the raids, right? You'll probably want Ascended or exotic stuff, right? Like a mix, Ascended exotic mix. And then she came out with the comment that you're probably just going to want Ascended for the final boss in I don't know whether that's the raid wing or the entire raid. Ascended, absolutely. Which is kind of a weird thing for a dev to say. Why do I say that? Well, because Guild Wars 2 isn't based entirely on the gear, right? This absolutely isn't one of those games where success or failure is purely based on gear, and there's a lot of skill involved too. And to kind of say, oh, you absolutely have to have Ascended gear, is to push it to, like, this razor-thin wire of success or failure within just a 5% stat margin. I don't know whether that's some kind of overly confident thing for the devs to say, but basically what they're explaining is this is so hard unless you have 5% higher stats on your stuff, you're going to fail, which seems kind of weird to me. But that's what they've said. Next, we've got Pink Attitude, who says, if Ratasum did fall, because we've talked about this on a few of the Q&As recently, what would it fall into? Water, land, rock? Do we know what the map underneath them is like? I liked this question because it reminded me of one of the earliest theories that I, as a player, not one of the earliest theories of the franchise, I kind of got into Guild Wars lore around Eye of the North, and specifically when I started doing my Let's Play, I got more and more into it. So these were the later years, right? This was after the bonus mission pack and stuff came out. So I wasn't like one of those heavy speculators in the early days. So the first big kind of theory craft that I read online and liked the idea of and participated in discussion of was this idea that people had about why certain things interior float. And the theory was that they need water near them to float. And someone had managed to point out all these examples of floating rocks across the Tarnished Coast, the Wizard's Tower, across places even in Ilona, like you got the Mirror of Liss, and there's the giant floating temple there, and all these things were around water, and it was like, oh, maybe they float because of the water. It's just something I think warmly back on, and then you get this question, it's like, what would floating Ratasum fall into? Water? Well, you can fall down there, and you can kind of see. I guess it's going to be land. If you look at what that area was like in GW1, it absolutely was just land. These were areas that Wind Riders roamed. They were fields that you'd find dinosaurs and, you know, random wildlife like spiders and simians and things around. So I guess it's just going to be land. If they did do that, if Ratasum was destroyed, cracked in two, fell to the floor, they make it a giant explorable map, I don't think it's going to be filled with water, no. But we do, of course, know that around Ratasum, there are ports, and there is a river that goes kind of inland, so those would be features of the landscape too. Man, that's such an exciting idea to me. I can't get it out of my head. Moving on, we got the Great Skirazi, who says, do I think that the Fire Island chain will be a raid or a full map? Which would I prefer? I believe this question is inspired by the fact in yesterday's video, we spoke about how ArenaNet can add random wings in. They've said that they're happy to do this into different areas of the world. And we also now know that when they add raid wings to the game, they occupy physical space on the world map. Instead of being, like, hidden away in dungeons, like most of the dungeons are. Like, Corticus Manor is a bit of an exception, but most of the other dungeons are, like, underground, right? And they don't take space on the world map despite being instances. Raids are different. Raids will be on the world map and they'll be big. So if they drop a random raid wing in the future, that can absolutely fill in some of these weird gaps around the map or take us to new locations. So the question is, do I think the Fire Island chain will be a raid or a regular map? I actually think it could be both. You know, it's perfect to be both. If the Living World moves us to a place where we want to go to the Fire Island chain, they do a Living World update where they give us a new map, like when they gave us Dry Top or the Silver Waste, whether it's just a section of a map or an entire map. You know, Silver Waste, we've got the entire thing. Dry Top, we got just a bit. But what they do is they add like an open world map in the Fire Island chain, and then like the next update, they add adjoining onto it our next raid wing, and the raid wing takes place there too, and it's like maybe 2 of the islands are open world for us, and then the 3rd island in Abaddon's Mouth is the raid itself. They can do a mix, and that's what I think they probably will do in most situations. This does lead me on to thinking about one of the biggest questions after Heart of Thorns releases, and it's going to be this. It's going to be, how much can we expect of the world map to be expanded in Living World versus expansions in the future? I mean, is the Ring of Fire Island chain small enough to be good for Living World? Or is it too big and they're going to add it as like one region of multiple in an expansion? Who knows? The next question is from Jackal GW, who says, hey WP, what's your plan of attack for Heart of Thorns? ArenaNet's announced that Zerk will not cut it. On one of my most recent videos, covered what boosters I'll run, but what is my build plan, like in terms of gear stats, Dire, Carrion, Zerk, etc.? So my plan is something along these lines. I'm going to treat the game exactly as it currently is. I'm going to assume that you can Zerk your way through stuff. I'm going to assume that you can rally and you don't really need too much quality of life. And I'm going to assume that for both the instance content, and I'm going to assume that for the open world content and the personal story stuff. But as I start to struggle, and specifically I've already felt this a little bit in the betas, as I start to struggle, I'm going to start looking first at more defensive traits, more defensive utility skills, and if that stuff isn't enough, then yeah, I'll look at the gear too. And basically, I will just kind of notch it down a little. So you've got your full YOLO glass stuff at the moment, like if you're Condi, it's Sinister. If you're flat, then you've got Assassins or Berserker, right? That's pretty much your options at the moment. If that seems like a little bit too stressful or annoying as I'm just running around the open world doing meta events and stuff, I'll drop it a notch down. And, you know, those other notches do absolutely exist. So at that point, I could choose, right, do I want Vitality? And I would trade my Berserker stuff for Valkyrie stuff. Or if I want Toughness, then instead of going Valkyrie, I'll get Captain stuff. Or if I want Healing Power, then I'll go Zealot stuff. and then I'm still very heavy DPS, but I've got that little bit of comfort there on my build. And, you know, this applies to raids too. So then if at that point your 10 people have gone that one notch down and it works, then there you go. You find it comfortable and you can complete the content. If it's still too difficult to do, then you just drop it another notch and you go for those middling stat sets, you know, stuff like Cavalier, which now is Toughness Major instead of Power Major, or Celestial, which is the complete, like, middle of the road, right? And then if it's still bad at that point, specifically for raids, at that point, maybe then you can go like one notch even lower, and you can decide, do you want to be really, really toughness and tanky, or do you want to be like really healy? And for the toughness and tanky stuff, you've got Soldier's Gear, super classic gear set that I always think of launch. You've got Nomads, you've got Sentinels, right? Or on the healing side, you've got Magi's, you've got Clerics, and possibly Apothecaries. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just kind of thinking of it as, if it's kind of difficult, go a notch down, go a notch down, go a notch down, and we will see whether eventually some of those other gear sets really are what we need. That's my plan of attack. Next question is from Emily H, who says, when I have those inevitable moments of wondering what you look like, I for some reason picture the YouTuber Charlie McDonald. Close, perhaps? A lot of people picture that guy. I can promise you I look nothing like him. I am nowhere near as youthful looking. I am nowhere near as cute looking. I am more overweight than him. I am more bald than him. And I have blacker bags under my eyes. Absolutely way off base. Next question is from Radagand, who says, 2 questions. Number 1, where are all the horses? And number 2, why is Lion's Arch called Lion's Arch if there are no lions on the Tyrian continent? The horses is kind of a big topic. They do appear, or like reference to them appears, but they themselves have never actually appeared. It's kind of one of these cool little, I would even say like a hallmark of Tyria. Like if you think about some defining things that make Tyria feel like a different world to other fantasy worlds, kind of this weird, mysterious, absent, semi-ish of horses is really interesting. But, you know, they're kind of referenced. You'll see them in concept art. In Guild Wars 1, they were Necrid Horsemen, but the horses themselves we've not seen. I think it's kind of just tied to the whole mount difference with Guild Wars 2 as a franchise compared to other MMOs, but I like it, and I think ArenaNet should run with the ball of the horses. I sort of feel like it's just by accident there ended up not being any horses in the franchise, and it was never premeditated, and that's fine, but now that it's there, I really want the writers to recognize that there's a weird thing about their universe with horses, and they should just totally run with that. They should have some NPCs in Heart of Thorns that are like, hey, have you seen a horse recently? And they're like, what do you mean a horse? And they're like, yeah, you know, a horse? Actually, what is a horse? Huh. And then they just kind of walk off or something, you know, it would be cool. Just run with the ball. I think that's really interesting. The other thing with Lion's Arch, well, Kryta was originally a colony of the Alonans. The Alonans from a much more desertous, tropical region to the south where lions absolutely would have been found. And so what likely happened was the Alonans came up to Tyria. They built their port. And perhaps they carried sigils of lions. Perhaps they had lions with them. Who knows? Maybe there's some kind of a story there that is as yet untold to us as the players. But it was likely that Alolan influence and the Alolan understanding of what lions were that led to Lion's Arch having its name and the statues of the lions being built. And then it was remembered for many years forward, even after Kryta became its own place separate from Alona. So that's kind of the idea there. Next question is from T. Corwing Guitar, who says, you're getting close to 100,000 subs. Have you got any plans to celebrate the milestone with a special video or something? None at all. I'm a bit boring like this, but I don't really celebrate subscriber amounts. Just because subscriber count means nothing whatsoever on YouTube. Like, a really sad thing about the industry at the moment is people look... not just users look at subscriber counts as something important, but even people within the industry look at subscriber count as some kind of measure of how big a person's audience is, and it means nothing, you know? If I don't upload a video for a year, right? This is the last video you see from Wooden Potatoes, and I go, bye-bye, guys. I'll probably, you know, after that year's over, I'll probably still have, like, you know, 80,000 subscribers. But then if I start uploading regularly again, only, like, 1,000 or 2,000 of you will have stuck around. So I don't actually have a big audience at that point. I have no power, really. But to look at the sub count, it's like, oh, he's so huge. It's totally arbitrary. The only thing I've ever really celebrated are view milestones, and maybe we'll see what happens next time we hit one of those. Next is from Light Years, who says, are there any Guild Wars 1 areas you missed that are just slightly out of reach of the current map? For example, Icetooth Cave, north of Snowden Drifts, or Wizard's Folly, south of Ashford. I don't know whether this counts, but like the Boreal Station and the areas just around the Eye of the North, The Eye of the North is this tantalizing, tiny little pocket of traversable land far up to the north and remote from the rest of the playable game. I spent a long time trying to break out of that map at some point, maybe a year and a half ago, and at one point you could as a thief, but ArenaNet patched it, and there were some old videos on YouTube even of it, but they're really hard to find now, and I wouldn't know where to look anymore. It really excited me, the idea of breaking out of the Eye of the North and going back to those places, so anywhere around there probably counts. Another thing that really springs to mind, and I'm not sure why this, because it wasn't really a playable place in Guild Wars 1, but on the map in GW1, near the Henge of Den Ravi, sort of on the border between Kryta and the Maguma jungle, in GW1 they had kind of painted on there a mountain. And it looked like there was kind of a lonely mountain on the border between these two regions that you could never explore in the first game. And I was really looking forward to being able to go there in Guild Wars 2. But we couldn't. And especially with, you know, their reveals of what the jungle's like in GW2 Heart of Thorns, it just seems like it's this thing dead in the water now. It doesn't even appear on our map in Guild Wars 2. And that makes me sad. The mountain that was, but now has just been, you know, completely removed from existence. So there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. Thanks very much for watching. If you had any thoughts or questions of your own, you want to hear me talk about some more interesting stuff, maybe, feel free to leave them down below. I'll try and look at the most interesting ones as I possibly can for next week's episode. Hope you're all having a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Catch you next time, everyone.